Welcome in to Making the Leap, our 2023 year in review, our retrospective, some of our favorite moments. If you didn't catch last week, you'll hear a few of those, and now this is installment number 2 as we wrap up this year. We've already got some exciting episodes coming up for you in 2024, as well as some guests that'll be coming in here, some events at the Herzog Society. 2024 promises to be a really exciting, pivotal, important year for school choice, most specifically Christian education. So thank you, first of all, for downloading Making the Leap all year long and subscribing to it and making it a destination. So as we go through these clips, if you have not heard these, as I said last week, if you've not heard these before, I would encourage you to go back and listen to all 80-plus episodes. I'm proud of all of them, frankly, for various reasons.
It really was we said this last week, it was tough to pick what to include. And I would say these represent a fraction of our favorites. Do you know what I mean? Like, we had so many that we walked out of here, we closed out thinking, oh my gosh, the text I would get, the messages I would get. I actually went back to people that I know are regular listeners, like they do not miss an episode. And I said, send me what you're thinking. I wanted to make sure it was similar to mine. And I just asked what stood out. I didn't even ask for favorites. And so a lot of what you're hearing today is coming from people that were thinking along the same similar lines, and they all said, I can't just pick a couple. And that's a real testament to the quality of people that we have engaged with. And I'm grateful that they will give their time up for us, sometimes multiple times, to talk with us or take the time to come in studio.
You'll probably hear from this next featured guest as one of our favorite clips of 2023. You'll probably hear him again in 2024. I think we've talked to him at least twice. Maybe once a year now for the last 2 years we've done the show. Lucas Miles is his name. Lucas is a pastor in Indiana, and he's written a book called Woke Jesus. And one of the things that Lucas reminds us as Christians, not just as we talk about sending our kids to Christian school, but what kind of church is playing the role in our lives as backup and our fundamental formation, and
which has been really important to us because we've experienced issues with that personally, and so this was something that I think spoke to us individually in a way that not everyone has experienced. I actually hope you don't have to experience it, but it's important.
Yeah, so in keeping with the conversation that we've always made important, kingdom education being, at least a three-legged stool, the school, the church, and the parents, here's Lucas Miles.
I know there are parents that think, well, okay, I've got my kid in this public school, but we send him or her to youth group, and we're here, we're in church, and we're doing this, but the youth and the elementary programs sometimes are not valid at all in terms of biblical information.
I think this is such an overlooked phenomenon that's happening in our culture today, that we are missing the idea or really the fact that there has been an infiltration even within Christian publishing. So it's not just that public schools are, presenting these ideas. It's also that we have, now Christian, programs that are, and really publishers that are, have been infiltrated, and they're starting to create material that is woke. And they have Sunday school material and curriculum that's going out to churches, and it is, it's literally, laced with this sort of underlying liberation theology, Marxist doctrine that's worked its way into this Christian messaging, and I think it's slowly, distorting the faith and really, setting people up for whether they realize it or not, being indoctrinated by wokeism.
So painful follow-up question: can you assess, Pastor, are churches leading the schools, or are schools leading the churches these days when it comes to our youth?
So I think that to some degree. I think that there maybe even is a third option there. Okay. And I think that there is a greater agenda. And the way that I describe this is the left has recognized that, and when I say the left, I'm not just talking about, I'm not saying Democrats versus Republicans. Mm-hmm. I think in actuality, we have very few traditional Democrats that are left in public office.
Sure.
I think that, traditional Democratic Party is not the issue what we're facing today is a Marxist infiltration
Yes.
of the Democratic Party,
Yeah.
and in some cases of conservatives as well. This is something that I believe Republicans and Democrats should be able to unite against Marxism and socialism and communism in this country. We know, even if we have disagreements about different policies, as Americans, we should be able to unite against a socialist structure. When you look at socialism, it's responsible for over 100 million deaths in the last 100 years. It should be pretty easy for every American to go, no, we don't want that in our country. But yet we have people that have been indoctrinated by this ideology. And so this sort of Marxist, infiltration, they have realized and recognized that if we can divide the church and if we can infiltrate the schools, then we can sort of control the populace. And they aren't going after boomers with this messaging. They're going after millennials.
Yes.
They're going after Gen Z,
Yes.
because that's where they can start, they're happy to play the long game with this. And so I think that there are, there's influential figures and there's organizations that are putting dollars into church denominations, into, schools in order to begin to lobby and push for these ideas to kind of become normal, everyday components of their curriculum and materials. And I think it's happening on both fronts right now that we're seeing this.
How about just in that short clip, there's no place that we go anymore in our world that is untouched by the infiltration of this wokeness. I'm really starting to hate the word woke.
I know.
It's obnoxious and it annoys me, but there really isn't anything anymore. And so it's just to be aware of it, and it's there. We can't dismiss it. I think we have to learn how to combat it or how to walk away from it. And he's a great one listening to for that.
Again, not to sound sanctimonious or judgmental in any way, but our daughter has noted, when we've sent her along with friends to certain evening activities at certain other churches that aren't ours, she notices differences in theological concepts.
That's the most primary important thing to me. She really does see the theological differences.
And that's what Lucas says in this interview, and I would encourage you to listen to the whole thing if you haven't. He really encourages you to know where your kids are beyond the school day. Okay, so you've got it figured out from, that 8-hour day in the classroom, but if you send them off to church or youth group or whatever, what are they learning in church? You got to watch that too.
Well, and the other piece from that episode, in many of our episodes, and people that listen to us know this, we try to have a guest. Sometimes it's just us talking. That one, we talked with him, but we also played a clip, and this was back from May, so we're talking, over 6 months ago, of the boy who had to go in front of his school board and make a comment about wearing his T-shirt that was considered offensive because it said there are only two genders.
Yep.
And it was a middle school student. And when I sat and went back through that episode, that was the other half of that one. So it's twofold, because our kids are now becoming fighters. They're becoming vocal talking points for these issues. And I resent it, but I admire it at the same time. But this was a 12-year-old kid who had to get up there.
We talked with Samantha
Seal.
just but a few weeks ago about leaving a K through 12 Christian education, going off to a secular college, and being ready to go into Babylon after you've spent some time in the what did she say? How did she put that?
Well, she said she called it her own personal Babylon, where she said going into her school.
But you need to spend more time in the temple before going into Babylon, I think is the way she put it.
Yes.
But these kids at a very young age who haven't had a ton of time in the temple are already going to war in some cases in their own Babylon.
And it was heartbreaking, and I was really torn on that piece, and I think overall that's a great one. Like I said, that was back from May, and I think that's a good one to be listening to.
Our next clip comes from she's a teacher.
She's not. She
not?
substitute teaches. She's not.
She substitutes.
She
So she does
teaches.
teach.
She does.
I was
but she's
completely
not
wrong.
Yeah, not completely wrong, but not a full-time teacher. I want to be clear. But she is a mom of 5, walking this journey within Christian education.
But she does specialize in science
She has
education.
a science background. She had a zoology background. She worked for the Kansas City Zoo.
Yep.
She comes in and is very, very good with the science education pieces. So she's kind of helped to coordinate and plan some of these field trips and things that students have done.
So
at
from
school.
time to time on this show, we will get into specific subject matter, whether it's math or science or sex ed. We even did this year. How do Christian principles come into play when you're talking about specific subject matters? Here's Tricia Hanska.
So you sub currently
I do.
at a Christian school, and so you see a wide range of kids. You see the kids like our daughter who's been in there just a couple years. You see the kid that's gone there from kindergarten. What are some of the differences that maybe you notice that parents listening can utilize or think about in order to help them make those decisions? Because our purpose here is to help encourage parents to just look at options. So what do you notice and what do you see in terms of how they respond and react to the Bible is true? We're going to start by talking about our scientific world using Genesis, for example, where somebody like our daughter is probably, well, I know for a fact in 7th grade, she was like, what? And then somebody who maybe has been there from the beginning.
For a while. I think there is in the students that have been there, I see a confidence.
Okay.
A confidence that God's word is true and right, and that we can look at our world through that. That's not to say that there's not ideas from outside the Bible that creep in that make for good discussion. I think one of the things that our science teachers do well is that they do share those different perspectives. Our kids in middle school, I know for sure, get all the different perspectives of evolution to creation.
Right.
And then they go and look at and validate
what does the Bible say?
What does the Bible say? Right. So there's a confidence that those students have and discernment and being able to articulate what they know to be true in the Bible. Talking about that field trip and that pre-presentation I did, I noticed there were, it was a group that I talked to that has studied it. And so there's a couple questions I threw out that they had immediate answers for that in other places that I've spoken, it doesn't always come that fast. And so that was neat to see from our kids that they can articulate it, they're confident in it. And hopefully that translates to what they can articulate outside the school walls.
You know, as I listened to that clip again, the biggest idea, and we touched on this last week too, helping to get our kids into a place that when it comes to these tough topics, evolution, creation, young earth, when we're talking about all these things, that they are confidence, that they are comfortable in their knowledge. You know, just the other week I had a conversation with our daughter who said, do you know there's a lot of levels of hell? And I was like, oh my gosh. And she said, oh, and so that's what they're discussing in Bible class. But then she'll come in with science and she'll say, do you know? And she'll throw something out, and it prompts good conversation, but more than that, it is giving that background. And that is where I think parents like Tricia are hugely important in developing communities. I think if you can find parents like her in different schools that are starting, that have already been in existence, that have these very specific knowledge bases to pull from. I mean, I sat listening to a presentation she did and just thinking, oh, can you just come here and come sit with me and talk to me? And she really did talk a lot about concepts of sin and death and how that comes together to help support scientific ideas within that biblical worldview.
And also being aware that you will come under ridicule, you'll be mocked, and so kids have to understand where they're coming from and really kind of basic undergirding principles that they can talk about with confidence, so that when inevitably somebody comes along and laughs at them or points at them or says you're crazy or whatever, kids aren't rattled. Tricia really underscores how to communicate in a really confident way. That was cool. Speaking of confident communicators, our next clip comes from a talk radio colleague of mine and a guy that has been, in broadcasting, has been an author, has been a theologian for decades and decades. He's one of the deans of talk radio out there. Dennis Prager was a guest of this show this year, and Dennis isn't shy.
Doesn't mince words.
Yeah, back in October, I spent some time with Dennis at a live event for the radio station that I work with, and he made the conversation was kind of broad and political, but at one point it swerved into education and school choice. And the things he said in front of this live audience, it kind of blew me away. And I went over to him and I said, Dennis, you know, my wife and I do this show called Making the Leap. and I'd love to have you on to talk about what you said. Would you say it again? And he said, just tell me where. Sure, I don't care. And he did.
He did.
Dennis Prager.
Women are playing a wildly disproportionate role in ruining children. I don't mean as mothers. I mean as people in the education system, people advocating that we teach children that they're not boys or girls. They'll determine whether they're a boy or a girl. Drag Queen Story Hour. The death of standards in education, because we don't want any kid to think ill of himself if he only has a grade of 50, so we'll pass him anyway. This is overwhelmingly done by women. 85% of librarians are women. That's where many Drag Queen Story Hours are taking place. About 85% or so of kindergarten teachers are women. A vast majority of school principals are women. The vast majority of elementary school teachers are women. And if we have no problem acknowledging that men disproportionately commit violent crime, if we care about honesty and we don't fear what the left will say about us, because you can't be honest if you fear the left, because truth is not a left-wing value, then you will just as readily acknowledge the disproportionate role women are playing in hurting children.
You know, when I listened to that, talked with you about that and listened to that, I remember I was hearing it for the very first time. I've now heard it multiple times.
Made some people mad.
Oh man, I just kind of sat back and thought, oh, well that is a lot. That is a lot to unpack. But the more I sit and think about it, and again, in reflecting on this episode, it's a heavy statement, but it's so true. And it really, I think, is encouraging people to really take a look at how often they speak up, when they speak up, and how they speak up. Because I think there are so many people who could really be voices for good if they didn't just sit back in silence. As women, we are the nurturers and the caretakers. I think men generally, can be looked at as the providers, not always, but many times. But we are the ones who are primarily sitting in educational settings, like he mentioned, librarians and, elementary teachers, kindergarten teachers. That is heavy. And while I know there are a lot of Christian teachers who are working so hard to do the right thing when it comes to issues that are big, these social justice issues, I think for every one that is pushing and doing the right thing, there are so many more that are staying silent, and it's at
you mean
great
in public
harm.
school?
Public school.
In public
In public school. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that I think are doing a lot of harm by not talking.
Yeah, it's we talk about this a great deal, you and I privately, when we're putting together these shows or thinking of guests. I mean, quite frankly, the conversation is largely dominated by women, and
Right.
women are primarily in this space of education.
And I think he specifically mentioned even elementary, because I know the stats shift a little, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
They're
And
causing great harm by not.
Which is not to
speaking
say
up.
that's the way it ought to be or has to be, and not to say there aren't great men in the
Right.
field of
Right.
education either. But women do dominate it, and it's people bristle when they first hear him say it. But when you think about it that way, there was once upon a time where men were kind of seen as the potential creeps and problems. And he said, that's
Now
not
it's-
who these kids
no.
are spending the majority of their
I
day
know.
with. It's
and
women.
it kind of makes you, just like you said, take that step back, kind of
Yeah.
cringe for a moment. But that was a hard one.
Yeah, so that was a good one to listen to, maybe, when you're on a treadmill or something. Next, though, speaking of dads, this was one of the episodes that involved a dad. We brought in two parents, friends of ours, personal friends of ours, who were late to the homeschool party, but ultimately ended up embracing it and aren't looking back. Ashley and Tyler Mackey. Now, Tyler was interesting because he was really candid. This is a dad who went to public school. I believe his parents taught.
I think they taught at least one of them. Yes.
But he came up in public school. He said, I loved my public school. So when I got married and we had kids, I thought, hey, public school, I'm going to wear the shirt. I'm going to go to the Friday night football game. And frankly, homeschool kids are weird. And he wasn't afraid to say so. But his wife was really convicted. We're going to educate these kids at home. And she made the case, and they shared with us their conversations that led to ultimately homeschooling their kids.
Brought it up to me. It was a hard no.
Is that right?
It was a hard no. I'm not budging on this.
What'd she say?
She said, I think it might be a good idea to homeschool our daughter. And I go, I immediately went back to my childhood, and there were kids that would enroll in public school that were homeschooled, and they were always extremely sheltered.
Yes.
They came from really, really religious backgrounds, and they didn't quite fit into the school. And I think it was just more of a shelter issue, more of a didn't know how to make friends. I wasn't aware how much homeschool had changed and what's available for those kids now versus 35 years ago.
Okay.
So I think my comment or quote at the time was, no, we're not having weird kids.
I was just going to say, you're going to go with the weirdos. Yeah.
No, it's fantastic. And you're, okay, so your heart is telling you we got to do it. He says hard no. So what does that discussion look like as it evolves?
Well, at
You
that
won,
point,
I
it was
guess.
okay.
Clearly I
I mean,
lost.
ultimately, I won.
Well, you didn't really
And-
lose,
and
did you? Like, it's really better.
True.
And it wasn't. I mean, if he was truly against it, we would have at some point found our
Right.
way.
Right.
You had to
but
make the sale, obviously, a little bit. You had to talk it up,
I mean,
or no?
it was
She
so
has a way of planting a
organic.
seed and then just letting it be. And then she'll sprinkle it with a little bit of water, a little sunshine on it. And then she'll just let it be. And then she'll go in for the kill.
Have you become an advocate? I mean, are you now from a, no, I can't see this, to now I would gladly tell people this was a good decision? Are you there yet?
Oh, 100%.
You are.
100%. My wife does an amazing job.
Yeah.
I mean, the amount of research that she puts in, the amount of care, like she'll notice interest in our kids. You know, they've developed an interest in something, and then she'll find curriculum that fits that interest. That way, you know, school is a fun thing for them. They're excited about learning about it. I mean, the amount of books my daughter reads is just unbelievable. I mean, she's probably read more books than me at this point.
Which is, I mean, that will forever be one of my greatest accomplishments. I mean, I had always been of the idea that somebody that knew what they were doing needed to be teaching our kids how to read, how to write, how to do all of those things. But it's such a natural process. All you have to do is be there and learn right alongside of them. And so it's so much easier than what I ever would have dreamt that it would be. But to teach our daughter to read will forever be one of my greatest accomplishments.
You know, I think having those two different sections of that interview, that was another tough one, I think, for us to pull stuff from, because there was a lot in there. But showing the dynamics and talking about the dynamics of what goes into these kinds of decisions is important. And I fully, like you said, I fully respect that he acknowledged the hesitancy, but I also fully respect that he was like, she's doing great. Like, she's doing all the, you know, she's
Changed his
working really
mind.
hard. And by just, you know, really saying, no, I'm really feeling pulled, and he's listening, that shows that, I think that was a big piece.
And what they experience in their own community now, I don't want to embarrass them, and they didn't say it quite this way, but here's what we know is true about the Mackeys. While he was a reluctant homeschool dad, he now sees parents in his community reacting to Ashley teaching these kids at home, and they're interested in what she's doing. And now they're becoming sort of, if you want, leaders or role models, and people are looking in saying, maybe I want to be a part of that. So he went from feeling weird and outside to now sort of feeling like a bit of a leader in his own community.
And for it not to even be on their radar Herzog recently featured them as one of a family that they were kind of following along for a day with activities within the homeschooling realm. I just think it just goes to show that it's just the average everyday person that says, I'm going to try something different with my kids.
Yeah, there's a really, and I think we still keep those at the Herzog Foundation Instagram account. If you're on Instagram and you go to the Herzog Foundation and look for this, in our stories there, you'll be able to watch the story of both Ashley and Emily. Ashley and Emily, and kind of a day in the life of their homeschool journey at home.
Just one of those neat things that I think Herzog is doing, you know, to kind of promote choice and advocacy for parents.
We'll be doing a lot more in 2024 with homeschooling too. That's a promise, because I know that's something in this audience that a lot of you care a lot about. So we will continue to talk about it. One of our favorite things every year for the last 2 years, and certainly it will be again in 2024, is our Teacher of the Year. This year, the first year we did it, we weren't able to meet them all in advance. This year was a little different. All of the Teachers of the Year came here to the Herzog headquarters, and we got to meet each one of them before they were awarded their Teacher of the Year designation in Washington, D.C. at the Museum of the Bible. They were all tremendous. I don't want to suggest that any one of them were any better than the other, but one in particular stood out to us, and it was because, I would say, of the way in which he communicated. He's a young man, a new teacher, not even married yet. At least he wasn't then, was he?
He is now.
He is now, but he wasn't then.
But he wasn't then. Yeah.
So I mean, he's a pup. But you've never ever heard a clearer-headed voice than Jake Counter. Take a listen.
It's great to have kids that you've had since 8th grade who know all of this, but you have some awesome testimonies that come from kids who came from a public school, they're there as a freshman, and now they've gone through 4 years of like apologetics and understanding biblical worldview, who, I mean, just recently I saw this girl that had graduated was applying for a job at a church. Her mom showed me her application, and it said, like, I grew up Christian, but it wasn't until I took these classes, like at ICHS, that I actually became a Christian myself.
Cool.
And so it also does come with difficulties as well. There's parents whose maybe their kids are in the school because they don't necessarily appreciate the education that their students are receiving at the public school, you know, and so maybe the kids are they've got friends at the public school and they don't necessarily like having to make the change, and so there can be some buy-in with them, but you know, all of it is just under the Lord's sovereignty. You know, you take the kids that you've got, and you're certainly not going to feel frustrated that like not everyone's 100% bought in. You get a wide range of students, and it's a blessing to interact with all of them.
You know, he was one that I wish we could have talked to longer. There's always people that you want to just, like, let's continue this conversation, because when we also then did get to see him in DC, continued the conversation, and he said a few things, and I'm like, well, that would have been awesome to put in the podcast.
I wish I'd known that. I told him in DC he should do his own podcast.
I know. I keep
he really should.
A little stalking, like, are you doing that yet? But within that episode too, and something I liked about that episode was we also talked with a woman named Janelle Rupp, and she was one of the people that was doing.
She was the sex ed teacher.
She was the sex ed one. She's bringing this program to middle schools, maybe high schools, but primarily middle schools, Christian schools across the board. But again, speaking to us as parents, it's always interesting to have those kinds of guests too. And we did 2 episodes where we talked with a teacher who was working within agriculture, someone coming out of a Lutheran school, someone, you know, we just had a variety. I think one out of the Ozarks that we spoke to as well. So when you go back, if you want to pull those episodes, those were in September. And I think those are just neat ones to give kind of an overview on what a Christian school can look like, because they're not cookie cutter. There's nothing that I think is similar or the same from school to school. They have similar base, but they all do things differently. And so talking with Jake, hearing how he was reaching kids spoke to me specifically with our own son's experiences, but just knowing that he's getting to watch these kids become disciples for Christ was an incredible thing to listen to.
Yeah, to talk about him just now being newly married, not even having children yet, but there being no doubt, you know, in terms of how he's going to raise his own kids. And you will love listening to this guy. If you didn't hear it for some reason, check it out. It gives you all kinds of hope that there are great young teachers out there, particularly in the field of Christian education. He teaches Bible specifically.
And talked a lot about the challenges that parents might experience, you know, moving a kid, especially at that middle school, high school level. If you're moving your child from a public education setting to a Christian education setting, obviously that comes with its own set of issues. And he was really good at saying, like, you know, of course there's going to be issues, but why wouldn't you want to do this? This is, you know, the ultimate path that we're on here, and that's big.
So there's 80 plus episodes over the last couple of years now that we've done this show?
Almost 2 years. It's about a little
two?
over a year and a half.
Year and a half
I was
or
going
so?
back and looking at the days.
But a lot of episodes that I hope you'll check out. I mean, all the way back to the beginning of the show and
Well,
how we wound up here.
You know, and one that I didn't put in, and I really debated, but I thought it kind of acted as a standalone, was our 1-year anniversary show. So
That
we
was
talk
fun.
about our 100 episodes, but we had our
Live
1-year
audience.
anniversary live audience.
You're in-
It's on there to listen to. I would really go back and listen to that. We had great conversations with
that
teachers,
March?
parents. I'm going to say April because I feel like it was birthday-ish time.
right around your birthday?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was something that I think is well worth it to listen to because we had an audience come in and had great conversation and met some wonderful people. I just thought that was another neat one. And just, again, speaking to what Herzog is doing to connect with families and communities and schools.
And there's a lot of special stuff coming up in 2024. You know, we have the Teacher of the Year submissions going on right now. Actually, as you listen to this in December, you still have the opportunity, if you think you or someone you know deserves recognition nationally from the Herzog Foundation, you can go to the Herzog Foundation website and nominate your teacher, or you, if you'd like, for Teacher of the Year. Maybe we'll select you, and maybe we'll see you in Washington, D.C. next fall.
But
I'd
the
also-
podcast angle of things
Well,
here.
the podcast network is really exciting. It's growing by leaps and bounds. By next year, I can tell you, I already know of at least one, probably two new additions that will be joining this show, as well as our friend Linda Cardamus, who's a new Herzog Podcast Network featured show. The podcast network will continue to grow. All kinds of new media projects that will be coming out of the foundation in 2024. And then, of course, for always, those of you that are looking to start, you don't know where to start.
Right.
That's the most important thing about what the foundation does is if you just want to start your own school, a micro school, a Christian school, a home school, there's just no better place to start, I don't think, than with the Herzog Foundation School Box.
Absolutely. Getting the ability to get paired up with somebody as a mentor, as a coach, somebody that can say, I've walked this path and I'd like to help you walk this path. Are you a school of 10? Do you want to be a school of 50? You know, are you rural? Are you urban? The possibilities are endless coming along. How do you fund it? How do you staff it? Kind of merging that business end of things with the education piece, that's a tough thing to do. And so I think that's something that Herzog is doing more and more. I've already, if you go online and you look up Herzog Foundation, you can already see what's starting to get lined up for 2024, what events are available. They're nationwide, so you never know. There might be something in your area close by, for a drive, and well worth it when you're in that position of trying to start something that is just incredibly important at this time.
So that'll do it for this year. I hope you had a great Christmas season. I hope you have a wonderful and blessed new year in 2024. I would just say on behalf of all of us at the Herzog Foundation, I think these people are remarkable. They're just God-led, God-honoring people who are doing great things and helping parents explore alternatives in education. It's just our honor and privilege to be able to be here and host this show each and every week. We're grateful, beyond grateful that you listen. I should say thank you to the guys that you don't see who make this show happen every single week and sit down and put it
Very
together.
patient with my flubs and mistakes.
Matt and Noah.
Yes.
Matt and Noah are just spectacular. They work behind the scenes, lighting everything and keeping the cameras. Then they go back and they edit this mess of a
Makes
show.
me tired. I have to watch them mess with cords and things that are just beyond what I understand.
And our colleague Valerie, who
Yes.
then works to put it all up on social media.
Couldn't do it without them,
No,
for sure.
mean, we show up and yammer. They make it actually look good. So we thank those guys, and we thank you
Absolutely.
for listening. And we will see you in 2024 here on Making the Leap.
Making the Leap is a podcast presentation courtesy of the Herzog Foundation. Please rate and comment on the show, as well as subscribe so you never miss an episode. And we'll see you next time on Making the Leap.